Hello, my name is Anna-Marie Rogers, and today I want to discuss the effects that poverty can have on juvenile delinquency as well as one's environment. To start off, I want to clarify 4 different words. According to Merriam-Webster, poverty is the state of one who lacks a usual or socially acceptable amount of money or material possessions. You could also define poverty as being extremely poor. It is important to understand that the definition of poverty can differ between the different living environments that you inhabit. Then we have socioeconomic status. This is defined as an individual's or group's position within a hierarchical social structure. Socioeconomic status depends on a combination of variables, including occupation, education, income, wealth, and a place of residence. Sociologists use this status as a means of predicting behavior. Lastly, we have early and late onset delinquency. Early onset refers to any individual that is younger than 13 years old, and late onset refers to any individual that is older than 12 years old. Moving on, we must first look at the statistics behind various aspects of poverty and delinquency. As you can see in the figure to the right, there is a slight difference between moderate and serious delinquency when it comes to SES. Moderate violence's odds ratio just barely reaches 1.5, while the serious violence odd ratio is around 1.75, when the family SES score is around negative 1.0. Adolescents whose family's SES was lower than average were almost 1.5 times more likely to offend during that time period compared to when their family's SES was average. Average in this case refers to the individual family's SES rather than the average of the entire population. Along with low SES, children living in a single-parent household are often more aggressive than children living in a single-parent household with a high SES. Those that have experienced persistent poverty have a higher level of involvement in delinquency as well. In the United States and Canada, approximately 35 to 40% of all single-parent households were poor compared to 10% of two-parent households. This statistic increased in comparison to Finland, Sweden, and France, but decreased when looking at Nordic countries, the UK, Austria, and Ireland. Studies have also shown that households who earn less than $15,000 per year were approximately 2 times more likely to experience aggravated assault and approximately 3 times more likely to be robbed in comparison to households that earn more than $35,000 a year. Perhaps this is due to the fact that violent behavior / delinquency is more likely to occur in low SES neighborhoods. Child poverty is at 20%, but it is shown that at least half of our youth will experience poverty once before reaching the age of 18. The percentages for child poverty have remained constant since the 1990s, but the actual number of children has since increased. And exposure to poverty increases a child's risk for participating in delinquent behavior, regardless of if we were to look at the youngest amount or the longest amount of time spent in poverty or the overall percentage of life spent in poverty. Children that live in wealthy neighborhoods are less likely to have behavior problems than children that live in poor neighborhoods. It has also been discovered that neighborhoods have a statistically small but significant influence on the behavioral development of children. Neighborhoods have close to the same effect of any other intense environmental situation, such as parental divorce, which suggests that there are other variables that may come into play rather than one definite influence. Poverty risks are lower for households whose head has a professional or managerial job versus other skilled workers or laborers. Single mothers are more at risk for poverty compared to single fathers as well. OECD stands for Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and in the chart to the right, you can see that the United States has a large gap between couple parents compared to single parents. The percentage of poverty reached for couple parents is approximately 11% in 2007, while single parents have a high of around 39%. Households that are ran by white males have a higher rate of exiting poverty, while black females have a much lower rate of exiting poverty. Black and Hispanic children are more likely to live in lower SES environments than white children, and in the contrary, white children actually have a higher involvement with poverty crime and drug sales compared to black and Hispanic children. Households that have the longest duration of poverty are typically headed by females. They are also more likely to have multiple periods of poverty. Males have a higher rate of delinquency than females, even when we look at different age groups, such as comparing 6th grade to 10th grade. Serious crime can be defined in 6 categories: burglary, auto theft, forcible robbery, aggravated assault, rape, or homicide. Some studies even expand these categories to large drug offenses. For example, selling drugs as a serious crime can be limited to selling hard drugs like heroin or cocaine, but don't include marijuana, or they say that earning over $500 from selling drugs is a serious offense. Moderate crime mostly just refers to gang fighting and simple assault, and minor crimes are nonviolent acts like stealing a bicycle off the street, stealing items worth less than $5, selling stolen property, and purse snatching. Single-parent households not only have a shortage in money, but also time for childcare and household responsibilities. Most have to choose between taking care of their child or going to work. Children born into low SES families are at high risk of being born prematurely, have a low birth weight, fetal alcohol syndrome, AIDS, or have a disability. Those children born prematurely in low SES families also have a significant increase in health problems within the first 3 years of their life. Having chronic stress of unemployment or hardship increases the likelihood of partner and child abuse. Low SES parents rely more on negative control strategies that incorporate low warmth and responsiveness, which in turn leads to children to bond more with peers than their parents. Peers that are currently involved in gangs pressure other adolescents in low SES neighborhoods with poor family relationships and poor monitoring, and that's a large factor in delinquent behavior spreading. Delinquent behavior typically is a group occurrence anyway, so when a child creates a bond with members of the gang, they feel as though they can gain more opportunities that they may not have had made possible before. Children in low SES conditions are also more likely to be exposed to drugs prenatally, and their parents who have a lower education increases the chance of their adolescent smoking and substance abuse. Long-term poverty has a greater impact on cognitive development than short-term poverty, but the impacts are much more likely to occur if the child experienced poverty before the age of 5. Low SES parents are less likely to purchase learning materials, regulate TV watching, and attend educational events with their children. Overall, children that grow up in poverty are much more likely to report a lower self-esteem. Parent unemployment and persistent poverty may lead to anger, depression, and the feeling of losing control. Constantly trying to adapt to the stressful environments associated with low SES households has long-term effects on biological and behavioral functions in the body. Some of those effects could take place is an increased activity level, unregulated serotonin levels, and weakened immune system. Cognitive theory and social development theory are two psychology theories that are based around juvenile delinquency. So cognitive theory are based on parts of our brain that organize and comprehend our surroundings and how it helps our problem solving, while social development bases around the development of antisocial and prosocial behaviors through 4 different stages of life, so preschool, elementary, middle, and high school. Situation action theory is a sociology theory that states delinquency is an outcome of perception choice process that is created through one's dispositions and environment. And interactional theory states that gang membership is a result of mutual relationship between an individual and their peers, social structures, weak social bonds, and learning environments that reinforce the delinquency. It can be argued that individual factors correlate with offending, primarily because of their impact on the decision-making process and perceptions. The two strongest predictors for late onset are poor school motivation and positive perception of antisocial behavior. Other things that were also thought to have an impact were poor supervision and peer delinquency. Community structure may also influence delinquent behavior if it generates a lot of temptations or provocation with low social control. These communities oftentimes are referred to as risk communities and are most likely in low SES areas. These communities have a higher rate of offenders, but are not limited to concentrated poverty, high residential mobility, population heterogeneity, and high family disruption. These structural characteristics in very disadvantaged neighborhoods are thought to not have a direct effect, but instead also rely on community social processes like socialization and informed social control. These social processes seem to produce high-risk social contexts instead of a protective social context like the advantaged neighborhoods. While there is still a debate on whether maternal or paternal education has a stronger impact on cognitive development, we can be certain that both have some effect as to whether their children will have behavior or skills issues. Expectations and attitudes of teachers towards low SES students are also more negative and can decline even more if the student is an immigrant that may not have very good English skills. Students are more likely to fulfill those negative stereotypes if they don't have access to stimulating environments outside of school. And this also leads to students becoming more engaged with those deviant peers. Juvenile courts require that parents come to any hearings that pertain to their children, but they are very limited in what they can do when their child is going through the court process. If the parents are unable to be involved in the court process, they oftentimes find other ways to be influential or involved in the outcome. This can be especially true for parents that have low SES because having authority over their family can be one of the very few things that they actually have power over. Families from a neighborhood or area that is high in violence usually relay the community's distrust of the justice system to their children, increasing the view of juvenile justice process, increasing trust with parents may have a long-term effect on juveniles in reducing delinquent behavior, especially those who come from a low SES environment. Race and ethnicity correlate with how a juvenile may view police officers. White adolescents, on average, have a higher view of police, while African American youth have the lowest view, and other minority groups kind of fall in the middle. It is shown that juveniles that have had negative influences or interactions with a police officer have significantly lower views of the police compared to those who have had positive interactions. Negative interactions are a major influence on views, but their social environment may also play a role. As you can see, poverty has many effects not only on our environment, but also on juvenile delinquency as well. We have seen that lower SES neighborhoods foster a lot of delinquent behavior that is reported. Black and Hispanic children are more likely to live in SES neighborhoods. Cognitive development and mental health is greatly affected by poverty. Parental distrust can hinder this justice process, and the distrust will lead to poor relations with police. Many factors that still need to be accounted for and talked about in depth, but this presentation covers some of the major aspects. These are my slides for my references. Thank you for watching.